Hello, everybody. Welcome to I don't know if I'd call this an impromptu stream. I just forgot about it basically until this morning, but I've arranged to have a discussion with Don the Pleb. Welcome, Don.
Thanks for having me. I know that feel.
It's a pleasure. I woke up this morning. I was like, I swear, there's something I have to do today. It's like, oh yeah, this stream that we've been trying to get going for like 6 months at this point.
Right?
Just needed to happen. Nice to see everyone in the chat. Hello. Hopefully, both my viewers and some of Don's viewers who've managed to migrate across. Staff Sergeant Sniper, I see in there. Mech, Andrew Frost, Adam Morgan, Captain Bees, all those good stuff. Here's the Eunuch, and others. Chat's already saying based Don, so I say
that'll happen.
That's nice. Is that I have to ask just before we get into like the serious stuff? Is the hat a custom?
It is. When foolish me, and for anyone thinking about starting a YouTube channel, don't get hats. That's all I'm telling you. Don't do it. Because you're going to make a hat, and every single member of the audience is going to be like, that is awesome, and I need you to sell it. And then you're going to try and sell it and find out that you can't.
Have you not looked at, because, what's it, Streamlabs does a service for that.
Do they?
They do.
Because I've been going through all kinds of things, and everybody's like, you can have whatever you want except hats.
It's hats. I did a design up the other week, and it's $12 a month for them to run your show, right? But to run your store, but that's 2 hats. That's 2 hats you need to sell a month, which is not bad as far as I'm concerned. As long as you're doing that, and if you only ran it for a limited time and you open the shop periodically, you just opened it for 1 month, and then it was that, then it could be good.
Run it like twice a year or something.
I don't know. It could do anything. I'm considering getting Halloween merch. I was considering getting Halloween merch. Now I'm thinking about Christmas. I'm thinking of like a Christmas jumper with various characters from, obviously, with their permission to use their likenesses, sort of like in a big snowball fight. I think that might be fun.
As the what is it? The headline banner of the channel is kind of thing.
Oh, yeah, that'd be quite nice, wouldn't it? Yiz has sent us $2. Thanks, Yiz, and says, how dare you forget a date with based Don?
You want to know what's funny about this is that I am in the same boat as Mark here, because up till I don't know, maybe a month ago, I would just keep track of streams in my head, and I usually could keep pretty decent track of what was going to happen. And then about 2 or 3 months ago, my schedule got entirely out of hand. And now if I don't have a calendar, I forget everything. So, and even then is basically getting up every morning and going like, okay, so who am I supposed to be streaming with today?
Getting old, man. Getting old. That's what it is. I can tell by the length of the beard. You see, I'm a youngster with my chin fluff here. Comparatively, but yeah, it's am I using my new PC from Pleb Enforcement? Yes, I am. This is all running nice and smoothly through my thing. I was corrected by the person who donated me these monitors. They are not 720p monitors, they are 1080p, but they run in a really weird resolution, so I keep getting these little errors from YouTube. Not that doesn't matter. Yeah, what we're here to kind of chat about today is the state of the world, the kind of the big questions. What we're going to do, what's going to happen in 8 days now, 9 days until the election rolls through. We know the results. Who's going to be the next president of the US? Better be Trump. I've got good money on him. It needs to be him. And,
I think you're still in safe bet territory. I get all kinds of touchy and stupid about the what do you want to call it? Term landslide.
I don't think it's going to be a landslide. I don't think.
Yeah.
No. It might be a landslide in terms of the states he wins, but I think the popular vote is much more divided.
Well, even the electoral college landslide, which is, the thing that actually matters here, right? I don't know. I get
so let me
probably ridiculously autistic about this.
That's why you're here, mate. Like that's the whole reason you've been invited on. Here's the thing, right? So over here, what happens is and I'm sure you know this, but for those of you who are American, all of the different you get assigned to a polling station. You go to your polling station, you vote for whatever candidate is in your area that represents the party that you want to vote for. Those ballots all go the same day to a big a ballot collection site for the constituency. So all of the polling stations send in all of their ballots to this one central location, and so every constituency has one, and then they have a little competition to see who can get their ballots out the fastest, who can tally their votes the fastest. Then obviously we have the votes come in for each constituency, who's won which constituencies, who are the new MPs, and then we know who's won in terms of the party. Obviously we don't vote for our prime ministers or our party leaders in the same way. So I'm curious in America how that differs, because I hear a lot of talk about the electoral college, and it's a concept I'm still not really I'm not that clicking with, you know.
So in the real basic short form of this is that you in your state vote, and then your state votes for the president. And electoral college votes are adjusted by population of the state. So Wyoming is either the smallest or second smallest by population, and so they get more electoral votes per capita, as opposed to California, which is the largest per capita or largest by population, and so their per capita electoral votes are lowered some. And the premise of this is that California, the state, has interests, and Wyoming, the state, has interests, and you don't want, just because California has 40 million people, you don't want them plowing over whatever Wyoming wants. And it's sort of this idea that like the minority will have an outsized influence on the presidential election, and only the presidential election. I mean, there's a hair more to it, but that's really how it works.
Okay. So it's like effectively a balancing. It sounds almost communist to me, man. I don't know. But yeah, no, okay. So basically, you balance for your, for the sake of my terminology, I'll call them constituencies. You balance out the interests of your state. So whereas here, a certain borough in London, for instance, might only have 100,000 people, but it still has as much voting power as all the others because they only have one vote. But yours is a bit more spread out.
Sort of. So I'm not precisely familiar with the MP situation. I think you guys do it by geographic area more than anything else.
Yes.
Is that
yeah?
Okay. So this would sort of be like if you averaged every constituency got, say, 5 MPs, right? Just making up numbers.
Sure,
right?
sure.
And then because one constituency was half the size of another, what you did is took 2 MPs from one and put it in the other, right? But they only got to vote on who was going to be prime minister for that.
Okay, yeah. No, that makes sense. I'm sure it'll go in at some point. So it's there.
So the idea of most of the American system of government is that governments have wants, and governments have their own preferences on how things would go, and that the different levels of government and the different parts of the government should be competing with each other. So hopefully they're fighting each other instead of screwing the populace, right? And when you get stuff like all of the things in the executive branch, right? So the EPA, the FBI, all these things, they give a lot of power to the executive branch that they shouldn't otherwise have, which is why people talk about all this power being granted to the executive. Because at the founding of the country, the executive couldn't really do a lot, which is why basically nobody cared who the president was back near the founding of the country. Like, well, okay, he's running the military, and if we get attacked, he's the guy who needs to be able to point and go kill that thing. And that was pretty much, I mean, he negotiates treaties, but whatever. Presumably what he's going to be doing is making sure we're not killing each other. So that's a
good start, yeah.
But since, I don't know, the 20s or so, in fact, a little bit before that, since about the turn of the beginning of the 20th century. We started creating all these executive branch things, and then the executive does a lot of stuff, and now everybody cares who the president is.
Yeah, I'm curious what the trajectory is in America in terms of things like executive orders and whether or not the average per president has gone up and stuff like that in terms of giving them out or having them adhered to.
Since at least Clinton, the trend seems to be more executive orders more of the time, and that was probably always going to happen. Once you create a system where the president, by the stroke of a pen, can effectively change policy, and that's what all these executive branch things do.
Mm-hmm.
It's the incentive is there, right? So if I want different border policy and I'm the president, I just tell immigration enforcement how to enact the policy that I want, and then I say that it's part of discretion or something like that. This is what DACA is. Is Obama basically said, well, I like illegal immigrants, so for this group of them, just don't enforce immigration policy, and that was called prosecutorial discretion, even though it's just not enforcing the law at all.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Just changing that out. Right. So, when it comes to dealing with my novice nature and America aside, in terms of you've obviously got a few more boots on the ground than I do. How are you feeling about the state of America? Is there anything which is? I mean, I only get my news from CNN, Don. That's all I get. The occasional Tucker Carlson's clip. That's all I can see. I don't actually see people on the ground. I mean, there are channels like Flecker's Talks, for instance, who go and nicely cut together idiots at protests, but it's not really. I don't know what the normie vibe is, and I don't know what the general sense of what's the mood of America at the moment. That's what I'm curious about, because over here, for instance, it's pretty dismal. We're pretty We're pretty polarized, and it's a mixture between the miserable on one side and the kind of the people who are very comfortable in their kind of lockdown state. So,
I think there's a bunch of answers to this, right? And I think most countries are going to have a bunch of answers to that, right? So the normies are generally unhappy.
Yeah.
Even if they think the lockdowns are a good idea, they're not happy about it. They see it as just some sort of duty that they have to do, because otherwise grandma's going to die. And not only is grandma going to die, but everyone you've ever met above age 55 is basically already dead, and the teenagers are about to cough up their lungs or whatever. So I might not like this, but I have to do it. So,
yeah.
But
because
go ahead.
Yeah, because the way I'm looking at it, right, is with regards to the American the election and stuff like that. It's really hard to tell through the swathe of things with the polls, which I don't trust, the media, who I don't trust, because I know that CNN's going to be pushing a heavy anti-Trump narrative, for instance, and just throwing things like, oh, it's not Hunter Biden's fault. We don't need to be talking about this right now. To be fair, the only thing which, and then you've got Fox News, which is going to be singing Trump's praises a little bit more. And pushing it the other direction. So the big problem I have is with the Hunter Biden thing, for instance, is I don't really care that Hunter got a job on an energy board, right? Because there's that kind of hypocrisy there. I mean, Ivanka Trump has no experience of politics, and yet she was an advisor to the White House. Unless you want to refute me on that. And I think her and her brother pulled in something like $1.5 million last year anyway on that. So,
well, the question there sort of becomes, what is it that, what are we calling corruption, right? Because if you put your family as your advisors, everybody calls that corruption, right? And while I am not intimately familiar with Ivanka's finances, and nor do I really care, if what this comes down to is that they are all pulling some giant salary, then that's exciting. But where I've seen that criticism actually land is, well, but they get Secret Service protection. Well, everybody gets Secret Service protection if you're even somewhat peripherally attached to the president by way of family. Hunter Biden has Secret Service protection, guaranteed.
Yeah, 100%.
Just because Joe was vice president. Or he has something very akin to that. So you can't. This is sort of like the someone drives on a road and I don't like that person, therefore they're terrible. Road use is corruption, and that is ridiculous. But in the world of what was going on with Hunter Biden, the question, and if this sort of thing comes out about, the various Trump family equivalently, it would be just as bad. The question is, are you selling state power through your family? So if Ivanka's out there and she's talking to, I don't know, whatever the left would say is the people they're talking to, ExxonMobil, right? And she's saying, look, if you pay me $100,000, then I will get you next to my father so that you can get what you want. That's the kind of thing that would be a real problem.
That's corruption, yeah. I think we can all agree on that.
And that's the thing, that is what the allegations are against Hunter Biden right now, is that is exactly what he was doing, except substantially more money.
Was this related to? Yeah, this is Ukraine, right? So this is, or is
Ukraine,
and
Burisma, all that sort of stuff. Yeah, and there is some indication that it was more than that. You have to kick X% up to the big guy, that sort of thing. That's another round of. I have what I've come to have called the normie focus group, and they were pissed on a different level, which I thought was hilarious, which was, who does this to their kids, right? Who gets their, we can all understand nepotism, right? So I got my kid a job because he's my kid, but who then goes to your kid and says, well, I got you a job, so you owe me 10% of your income.
Oh yeah, that was the thing, wasn't it? But he was taking out the accounts. Joe was. Although
there was a lot of, even the mafia didn't do this.
It's the dad tax now.
Exactly, and I thought that's true. That is the kind of thing where maybe as my kid grows up, I call up a friend that owns a business and I help him get his first job, and I think everybody would say, okay, that's not that big of a deal. But if then what I did was say, okay, so now what you're going to do is pay the rent of the whole house because you have a job, and not so much.
So it was kind of less the actions and less the motivation behind the getting of the job, but more the exploitation of that for your own profit that became an issue in the eyes of the normie crowd. Is that interesting?
Yeah. It was a character hit that I hadn't even thought of, and I was like, well, yeah, it is really a dick move.
It's interesting. We've had again, like, speaking of the projection level, because this just sounds like everything that they've accused Trump of over the last, in terms of the collusion and that sort of thing with foreign governments. It just seems to be really amazing. It's like they have no originality, so they have to project. They have to go, right, what's the worst thing that could have been happening? Well, we've been doing this thing behind the American public's back. Let's accuse him of it because we know that there's evidence of it. We've been getting away with it for so long that we can then push that onto him and claim other stuff. The closest equivalent we have had to it over here, and I appreciate this is nowhere near in scale, nowhere near the scale, was, but in similar vein, was Diane Abbott, who's an MP, black MP for Hackney North, in London. She's a dire woman, proper race grifter, and she back in the Tony Blair's government, she laid into Tony Blair for sending his children to private school, and of course 3 years later it came out that she had sent her own son to private school at the same time.
Oh yeah.
And she said, well, that's because West Indian mums go to the wall for their kids. It's like, but you literally, like, the hypocrisy was rank. It was horrendous.
It's only you dirty white people who aren't allowed to look after your children.
Well, I think she hit back and she said basically by inference that white mums don't care about their kids. And also, she wouldn't have had to send her kid to a private school if they'd managed to abolish private schools, as she had suggested. So it's just like,
oh my God! See, this is the same thing you get out of, it's amazing how much we have just decided we don't care about this sort of thing, because this was the same thing you got under Obama in the United States. Is he was out there talking about how private schools were the worst thing in the world, and they were degrading the education system, and they were making it so everything was terrible everywhere. Where were his kids going? Private schools.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, it's just like the all the communists who are very good capitalists. It's quite. I am a communist. Seize the means of production. Buy my merch. Buy my T-shirt, which says "Seize the means of production" on it. It's just ridiculous. Oh, also has chat's mentioning Diane Abbott's son, and it's like, I think he got indicted on meth charges recently as well, given that she's talked about what an amazing mother she is. And
so I don't know that that's a problem for the left, right? This is one of those things that when I talk about the left, people get upset, right? Because I sound like I'm just making them out to be the worst people in the world, is the kind of criticism I get. And the answer is yes, I am, and yes, because they are. If you were the kind of person who is out there and you are just running with this idea that all of the horrible things in the world are good things and should be promoted, and you are carrying that to such an extent that so much of the left is that if your own children are doing the worst things in the world, that's either A, acceptable, or B, a good thing, then I don't think I'm stretching too far when I say they're just terrible people, right?
Well, it's not. I don't think even, because I think it's inconsistency, right? It's not even necessarily that they don't have a moral framework, but how should I call it? The self-control necessary to hold themselves to their own standards, and in fact the creation of standards themselves, they can't do. And so that's why they then seek to abolish standards. But it's kind of a necessary part of human nature that we need rules, we need standards in order to function, because we all need to interact with each other on the same playing field socially, right? So what ends up happening is they create all of these standards, and then because they can't enforce them on themselves, they can't enforce them on other people, and really inconsistently. So they'll see, you get the projection where they've been doing something terrible, they know it's a standard that they should be conforming to, not doing this thing. They see someone else doing it, or perceived to be doing it, and so they hit at them with the force of 1,000 suns, despite the fact that it's rankly obvious that they're guilty of the same thing, or it's just not something which needed a rule around it. And then the other side of it, which is they're acting in a very low information state and very much on emotion, and so if someone can rile them up, it doesn't matter about what it is, then they'll run with that. It's what we in psychology call emphasis framing, as opposed to equivalence framing. So emphasis framing is basically just, if you can put a moral injunction on a statement, if you can attach an emotion to a statement, that emotion will override and make that statement true for yourself in the absence of anything else. It doesn't matter really what your actual behaviors are, you'll just have a perception that this statement is true because you have an emotion attached to it, and they're much more powerful than logic or reason or rationale.
So that is the weeds of words matter and actions don't. I think would be the most accurate way to say it, because this is the thing that everybody and their brother sees the left do, is nonviolence is good, hold still while we beat Whitey, and other, or racism is bad, let's get the group of white people to scream at the black cop about how he's an Uncle Tom. It just over and over and over again, this sort of thing, you see it all the time. And this is why I spend a lot of time on any arguments you make to even the tacit left need to be emotional arguments, right? Because let's be honest with ourselves. I've distilled this down to one question: if facts and logic were going to destroy the left, why didn't Thomas Sowell single-handedly destroy the left in about 1975?
Oh yeah, right. So Sal Friedman, the entire Chicago School of Economics, completely failed miserably.
Exactly.
And what I would say is, it's like to take the issue over there, which is one which came up last year, which was the kids in cages from the left, right? Kids in cages, and the response to that is not some statistic about human trafficking. It's not some statistic about how Obama was doing it before Trump was. It's, why do you want to support human traffickers, you monster? That's right. That's the hit back, because then suddenly they've been attacked. They have to assess what's being thrown at them, and then you can roll off the stats in favor of your argument, but you need that emphasis frame of the whole point of this is to prevent. We've tripled the arrests of human traffickers. I would rather separate children from their parents for 2 days than see them sold into sex slavery. Are you promoting child prostitution, Don? Is that what's going on? Right? That's
exactly. This is exactly the thing, and what kills me about watching the right is that this is why I keep saying it's a war, not a conversation, right? Because if you think it's a conversation, they're going, well, wait a minute, there's human trafficking, and human trafficking is bad. And that's the way that you frame the argument, not you people are in favor of human trafficking. And I know that because every time I try to stop it, you tell me no, right? And it is a very different game you're playing if it's a war. And
I think it's also a mistake to talk about solutions. I think it's important to talk about trade-offs, but you phrase it as a solution, right? So you come off as a much more rational and reasonable and sort of insightful person if you're looking at someone, and again we're taking this thing and saying, look, I would rather separate 100 kids from their family than see one of them sold into, drug muling, across the border or something like that, right? And you frame it as a trade-off, rather, because it is a trade-off, rather than we're only gonna separate the human traffickers, and we're magically going to know who they are as they come across the border. That's too utopian,
right?
Whereas the left would believe that they're all refugees, which is a utopian ideal, and it's easy to Mott and Bailey. That I know they have their Mott and Bailey, but it's easy to destroy both three. That's what I'm saying.
But and this is the thing is, the left will Mott and Bailey you on any subject, right? Presumably, if you school choice, for example, right? Well, we should make the public education system better. Okay, well, that's a thing that everybody agrees with. Therefore, that means we have to destroy private schools. Wait a minute.
that's a jump right there. That's a jump. Right. There was a great interview with Peter Hitchens that I watched. I really wish I could remember exactly where it took place, but he basically is having a chat with a leftist, and he, obviously being the staunch conservative, but with a background in being a bloody either a Marxist-Leninist or a Marxist trot. So I think he was a trot, but his brother was a Leninist. Anyway, doesn't matter. That's ancillary. The point is he sits there and a guy attacks him, and he says, now let's not go this way. I thought we were two people having a conversation, two moral entities with trying to find the best solution to a problem that we both agree exists. And the purpose of this debate is to discuss that. And that basically shut him down. It shut this other guy down briefly. Now, I appreciate that that's not a winning strategy in the long run, because again, we're running back into we're trying to make it a conversation when these people are just completely unwilling to have a conversation. But the fact of the matter, that was a dunk and a half, as it were. You can pull that out on occasion, but I think you can't use that as an exclusive argument, right?
Well, it needs to be the entry into whatever attack you're going to have. If you're the kind of person who wants to start out trying to have a conversation with the left, you could do that, right? And maybe you'll be that one lucky person who finds the leftist who wants to have a conversation, but probably not. And so the thing you need to be prepared for before this goes, full scale war, if you're the kind of person who wants to start off with a conversation, is, well, look, I thought we were trying to have a conversation. If we're not, that's fine. If you continue down this road, then I am very aware of what kind of discussion we're having, and I'm perfectly happy to have that kind of discussion. And at least it will give you sort of cover, I guess, right? So I showed up in good faith and you decided to be a terrible person.
Yeah.
And therefore, you have informed me that this is a discussion between people who are taking swings at each other, and fine, that's what I'm going to do from now on. Now, keeping in mind that what the left will do is edit that out so that you seem like the jerk, and edit out any aggressive questions before you get aggressive.
If I ever ended up on an interview with any prominent leftist, I would have someone there recording the raw footage for me, because that would be interesting. It's always fun to see how people twist. I'm trying to remember who it was. I think it was Tommy Robinson, and he recorded an interview with some Aussie guy, and he took one set of footage and then laid it next to the other. In fact, I think it was RV Yemeni, who's sort of the Australian Tommy Robinson. And so he went to this interview, and then the guy cut him completely out of context, including like some really clever cuts, like almost mid-sentence into another sentence and stuff like that. And so he released the raw footage and like the complete answers to each question that had come up on the show, and it was just night and day. The context was completely different, the answers were completely different. Sometimes he had cut the answer from one question as the answer to another question and stuff like that. Really horrendous stuff.
And this is basically what you should expect from these people, right? So Trump has taken a bunch of flack for walking out of a 60 Minutes interview. Well, look, you're the most dishonest people on earth. How much do I care if you're unhappy with me? And that's another thing is, everyone to the right of Mao, stop pretending like the left is going to be your friends, because they're not, right? You are. They have two options for you. They will destroy you, or they will co-opt you, right? You either bend the knee and pick up the flag and charge for them, or they will destroy you in total.
I had a chat with I have a colleague who is a black identitarian, and we have conversations every now and again. And I said to her once, I said, "Do you think I'm evil?" Because I'm curious. And she said, like, "I don't think you're evil, Mark. I think you. I really hope that you'll change your mind." And that's the thing. Until they realize that is not going to happen, they will be quote quote friendly. They will be cordial. As long as they believe that you're capable or willing to change, but only to their point of view, whilst also being completely closed-minded themselves. So just be suspicious of leftists who are. They would consider themselves to be kind-hearted in the sense that they're waiting to see whether or not either they or you are able, whether they are able to make you change, or whether or not you're willing to make a change for them. And the fact that we are, in many cases, open to listening to them, however briefly, even if we're laughing inside, it's something they will take as susceptibility. You should never lose your ability to listen to what they're saying, because you need to know where the next attack is going to come from, and you also need to be open, because once in a blue moon the left can be correct on certain issues, but it's very, very rare in my experience.
The left is almost never actually correct about anything. And this is the California kid touching situation thing is exactly what I mean, right? Because the left is very, very good at coming to you when they have no power, and saying something that is generally agreeable. The Mont and Bailey strategy mentioned earlier, right? So I know a lot of people were shocked when the bill passed in California that said having gay sex with a minor will not get you on the sex offenders registry, right?
Oh, right. Yeah, I remember that.
At the discretion of the judge.
Yeah.
And the implication there is, you get all these people defending it like, oh, well, you're still going to serve 20 years in prison. Like, well, let me get this straight. You think that there is a judge somewhere who thinks you should get a maximum sentence, but shouldn't go on the sex offender registry. I don't think those two things go together. Come on now.
Yeah.
But everyone was really shocked and surprised by this. And I said, and I had a few comments when I covered it under my videos that were, oh, you should have been upset when it was straight sex. And I went, well, I was. You just weren't watching it.
you just weren't politically active at the time. It's like, and again, I think this is an interesting point, just as an aside. I appreciate that I'm tangenting here. Is that often I find that people's commitment to the left, especially the label of left, is directly proportional to their newness to politics.
Oh yeah.
So that if you're new to politics and you're there and you've usually got a cause you care about. So for me, it was like a mixture of stuff I had to do for work in terms of the RAF, and also I was curious whether or not our country was safe, and the whole Brexit thing was going on, and I had been running a youth club for disadvantaged kids, so I wanted to make sure they were safe and that sort of thing. Then I'm in politics, and I'm left for a year and a half, and slowly radicalized because you come to be very familiar with all of the arguments, and then as soon as you dig a little deeper, it becomes much more difficult to justify a particular left-leaning position on many of these cases. And by left-leaning, I mean like strong left positions.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people I know who say, I'm not going to go into that because that's a completely other side. So you were saying about what were you talking about?
So the way that they get you into a situation where you're going to end up with there's an acceptable 10-year gap to not end up on the sex offender registry is that
right, yeah, okay.
Years and years and years ago, the left in California showed up and they said, look, dear right-wing people in California.
Dear right-wingers, dear white people.
Yeah, basically, right. And at the time, there were certainly a lot more of them around. Since then, the right has been fleeing California for 30 years. But at the time, it was, dear right-wing people, you people like high school sweethearts that get married. And we have drug up this one case where somebody was, the couple was 17 and 18, and one of them turned 18, and then the parents came down and prosecuted the 18-year-old because he had sex with his 17-year-old girlfriend, and they'd been dating for 4 years. See how ridiculous that is? Maybe we should not have that happen. And everybody in the world went, oh my God, who prosecutes high school sweethearts? That is just, you can't be freaking serious right now.
What a foolish
And
decision.
so,
yes.
Exactly. And so they passed this law that was, within 2 years, right? So if you're 19 and your girlfriend is 17, and then that's fine, right? And you can't be prosecuted for that. And you most certainly can't go on the sex offender registry. And then it was within 4 years, and then it was within 10 years. And, what am I describing here? The slippery slope. Oh, John, it's a fallacy, blah, blah, blah. Why does it keep happening? All right.
Yeah, no, I can see that. It's you've got to be very, very careful, because despite the march of incrementalism is does involve increments, right? So you can draw a line between 2 points unless they're all the increments that you need to get there. And if you're taking an incrementalist approach as opposed to going straight there, the potential is still there for it to get there, even in that sort of thing. So. And, it is human nature as well to say, here's the boundary, here's what's just over the boundary, why not a little more? And you can take this with something as simple as, as innocuous as grade boundaries for, like, exams and stuff like that. Because if you're someone who got, like, 79% and you needed 80% for an A, on your
Right.
exam, and you're like you're pleading with your teacher perhaps for a bit of special dispensation. Why? I'm just 70, but the line has to be drawn somewhere. And the difficulty is
Exactly.
with politics and policy is because of the changing face of the nation, because of the changing interests of special interest groups, and because of the huge number of different special interest groups that can arise. Anything that you can think of that could be a special interest group will be a special interest group if you wanted it to be, then you can always push for just a little more. You can always push for just a little more. And I think the left is much more willing to do that, certainly. But it's, yeah.
Well, the left is very tactically aware of this, right? So special interests are acute interests, right? There's somebody who cares a lot about a thing. If you came to me and you said, should mushrooms be allowed to be eaten? I mean, I like mushrooms and that's great, but I mean, is this the end of the world? Probably not. And in a more realistic sense, the question that we're asking this under in reality right now is about peanuts. And so, are peanuts allowed to be consumed? And if you just came to me straight with that question, the answer would be shut up and go away. This is not a thing.
Yeah.
But that's not how the left comes to you, right? They come to you and they go, this is Timmy. Timmy is allergic to peanuts. And if a peanut is consumed within 8 miles of Timmy, Timmy will break out in hives and die in seizures. And you go, oh my God, is that real? Holy crap, maybe we should do something for Timmy. And then they go, exactly. Now ban eating peanuts.
So two things on this, man. So the first is all of human behavior, unfortunately, whilst it's really difficult to predict individual reactions to things, you can kind of chart how things go. It's the normal distribution. So the expectation is 2/3 of, shall we say, 15%, basically, 16.5% at the top end of opinion, who are really in favour of something. There's 16.5% at the other end who are really against this sort of thing. And then you've got 2/3 in the middle who are completely and utterly indifferent and need to be incentivized in some way to support one or the other. And again, their support only needs to be marginal, right? Because they just need to be, I'm yes enough to say okay to this. It doesn't really affect me, or I don't really care. One of a real life example of this, for instance, in this country is probably the gay marriage thing, right? Mm-hmm. So it was something which was pushed by the LGBT lobby, LGB lobby as it was then, and it was it was something which obviously is only affecting about 3% of the population. Of that 3% of the population, it's 0.3% total of the population who are actually lobbying for this thing. And then you've got the other side. No one was really... then you had some kind of radical gay Christians who were against the idea of gay marriage because they were like, look, we're living in sin or whatever. We don't want to... only God can marry people and whatnot. And then you had the vast majority of gay people in the middle who were just like, do you know what? Civil partnerships exist. It's not going to make a great deal of difference to my life. Most of us don't want to get married in a church because Christians don't like us very much, and we don't care if it is legalized. We don't care. It just changes what we put on the letterhead. But what we get out of it and what the relationship means to us, it doesn't really matter. And that, of course, is taking the smaller subset of gay people who even wanted to get married, given the general culture of a lot of the gay community. But that aside, that's a real life example where suddenly you have to approach the normies, this tiny little fraction of the population, and be like, you hate gay people, and all gay people deserve the right to be married, and they all want to be married, damn it, and they would just get married if only you weren't stopping them. It's like, whereas in reality, most of them are a bit like, it was, not everyone is Sir Ian McKellen and desperate for his wedding. It's all different people.
And this is how the left plays, right? And this is the thing that I spend most of my time trying to convince the right of, is because they're doing that with everything, and I do mean everything. Find me one pro-leftist argument that is not backed up by how you're a terrible person if you disagree with them. Just one, right? There's nothing that is a, one side just happens to be wrong here. Every single thing, right? If you think that fracking is a good idea, it's because you want millions of people to die.
Here's okay. I think I can give you something.
Sure.
And it like I am making effectively it's a pro-left argument from but with in right rhetoric, I suppose. So for instance, I would say I would support an NHS. This is the argument. This is the profit. I support an NHS because the whilst private medical care works very, very well for everyone who is a net contributor to society, for anyone who is a net taker from society, for whatever reason, be it indolence and laziness, or be it, it's a disability or some kind of crippling healthcare condition, or or their children, that they should have access to at the a basic level of care, because you want to ensure that you have a healthy population going through your education system, whatever form that takes, so that you can take the most talented and productive people from those lower stratas of society who haven't had the right start in life, or the high enough rung on the ladder, as it were, and give them the best chance to achieve. That's an argument from a place of what the left would call compassion, but phrased in the rightist rhetoric that you want people to be productive members of society and that side of things.
Sure. So my point here isn't that you can't frame a pro-leftist thing as anything other than, if you oppose this, you want people to die. What is it that the left says? I mean, the overt lie, and I do mean lie, that I heard from the UK basically my entire life is that people are dying in the streets of America everywhere simply because they don't have socialized medicine.
Someone watched Sicko by Michael Moore, didn't they?
And this is the thing is hypothetically they could make arguments, right? So look, I think socialized medicine would be a good idea because, let's face it, and I've heard this from a few people who are vaguely left over the years, is nobody goes to get cancer treatment unless they have cancer. So presumably what we do is make sure that people who get cancer treatment, because it's ridiculous and terrible that people who live in the richest nations in the world die of cancer for lack of ability to get treatment. And that is a fairly nice sounding thing. But again, if you oppose them, what is the first thing they say? Well, the only reason you don't want us to do this is because you want those people with cancer to die, right?
Yeah, I'm not going to, when you're talking about things which are, so I suppose, like, emotionally charged, it's not that they're necessarily emotionally charged for everyone, and I think the right is much more likely to take a dispassionate view, right? But the left sees that dispassion as cold, a pure lack of empathy, as opposed to trying to work out the best way to make it work, or not work, and just saying, look, I appreciate. There was a friend of mine. He's a bit of a socialist, and disabled, and he's very left wing because he's kind of concerned about what he considers like a potential genocide of the disabled coming up, which he thinks that the Tories would instigate over here because it happened before in Europe when eugenics was a big thing, and what's the name of the phrenology, when with the calipers, and they were measuring the skulls and whatnot, and saying, well, your nose is too big, you must be Jewish, and that sort of thing. So and so he's concerned that basically he looks at things like NHS wait times being so long for people with congenital conditions like he has as a kind of like really soft, like a soft extermination of the disabled. So he's super leftist in that.
Oh God,
it's really a really emotional argument. And I don't mind his framing, but it's irritating when I come to him and I say, so for instance, he was saying we need to move towards green energy, for instance, because then if we take off the energy, sort of the barrier to energy, if we solve the energy crisis, and I'm like, okay, God, we're getting utopian here, unlimited energy,
Right.
but if we get past that, then everything's going to be cleaner. Less people will get problems due to air quality and stuff like that. It will take the ease off the NHS and that sort of thing. If and I said, well, how are you going to incentivize people to do that? I said, because my way of doing that is financially incentivize them. I say, instead of have a company which has developed a product which is more efficient and green than a fossil fuel company, and I say to people, irrespective of whether or not it's subsidized by government or not, I say this is going to make you better off in the pocket per month, and that's why you're going to do it. You're going to have an extra £200 a year, and you can go on another holiday, or you can go on a trip, or something like that, right? And he said, well, there's this Extinction Rebellion group that's hosting that seems to be doing good stuff. And I said, look, and he said, look at this, and it was like this group of naked women on some bridge in London, chanting in the cold in the early winter months last year. And I said, look, I said these people are turning people off your cause. You're not, there's no people here who are going to be attracted to this, apart from a mixture of exhibitionists and people who you've already convinced. So what's the point? And he said, well, at least they're doing something. And this again seems to be an attitude that I see primarily from the left, is as doing something is better than doing nothing. And I'm like, this is the politician's point of view, that you'll always pull the lever on the trolley problem because you can't be seen to be doing nothing. So it's like
there's so much in there, right? Because I mean, if you really wanted to incentivize all this green energy nonsense, given that basically everywhere in the Western world, electricity is effectively just nationalized.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not that's a good thing, whether or not I agree with it, it just is.
It
right?
is, yeah.
And scant few private electric companies exist. But for even the ones that do, they would be, I'm sure, happy to go along with this because it would make their profit margins incredible. If you really wanted to incentivize moving to electric powered everything, you would just build a million nuclear power plants. That's what you would do. And then power would become so ridiculously cheap that, I don't know what your guys' petrol prices are these days, but
how much are you paying per US gallon, Don? That's what I want to know.
I am paying about $1.60 a gallon.
So we pay about £1.20 a litre.
It's pretty close to California. It's pretty close to California prices, which are in the vicinity, basically at all times, of $5 a gallon. But being as that's the case, right? And make no mistake, for both of us, a lot of the problem is taxes. But being as that's the case, even if you cut the taxes, right, that would only get us down to there's only 40 cents a gallon tax, if I recall correctly, here in Texas. So that'd get me down to $1.20 a gallon. If electricity was less than a penny per kilowatt hour because there was just a boatload of nuclear power plants all over the place, you better believe I'm going to start having some serious consideration about electric cars, because as much as I will never be able to beat gasoline powered cars for long trips, of which I take a lot, but most people don't. If the reality was my travel expense was 35 cents a month for electricity.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really hard to compete with.
Yeah, it's also why natural monopolies don't often happen. Because you'd literally have to utilize the wealth of a nation to do that. There is a kind of strength in that, especially under like a monarchist system. But as nobody's running a monarchy with any sense, especially in the West nowadays, I don't think so.
Well, the big questions about that sort of thing are what is the objective, right? And nobody ever wants to hear this from me because it's it's not the I'm declaring an objective take, but Sol laid this out a bunch of years ago, and so I'm just going to steal directly from him. If you put all human activity towards any objective, we would gain more ground on that objective in less time than anything else going that has ever happened in all of time.
Yeah.
However, who decides A, what that one thing is, and B, how ridiculous is it to dedicate the entire globe to one subject?
Yeah, exactly. This is one thing which really irritates me with the left and charity work, for instance. One of the things which comes up really frequently is water aid and world hunger, right? And they'll talk about how, if we just stole all the money from the top 3 people, the top 3 billionaires, we'd be able to solve world hunger. And I'm like, are you fucking stupid? Aside from the fact that the precedent that would set, the fact of the matter is that the reason why world hunger and world thirst has not been solved is due to a mixture of socio-political issues, the cost involved naturally, and making people care about it when they've got problems at home, and secondly, the issue of infrastructure. It's about time as much as it is about money. But there's obviously the fourth factor in there as well, which is kind of like, some people don't want to be helped, some people don't want to be don't trust us. Also, who are you to go in there and change the way that people live, and maintenance and all that stuff? It's not like you just threw money at the problem and stop it, which is why, again, most charities now do grassroots projects.
Well, you sort of have to, right? And this is the thing for all the high-minded global charity people, right? Because they look at I don't know, pick a country, right, and go, well, people there don't have food, so if we just gave them food, then things would work itself out.
Give a man a fish.
And at bare minimum, right? And they have longer form arguments about this, like if you're actually starving, and there are places where that is a real concern, and it's not in the West. So look, if these people
like
are not...
Don, we do give an enormous amount of food aid. We do give an enormous amount of foreign aid. First off, corruption is a thing, and a lot of the stuff that's supposed to go doesn't. And secondly, through the expansion of technology and stuff like that, world hunger is at like 15% right now. It was at the beginning of the 20th century, it was at 85%, and now we're at 15.
And this is the corruption thing is really where this is at, right? Because the problem is not... it's not that we can't feed all of these people who are literally starving, because we can. And we do things that in some vacuum of a world where there was no warlord would feed all of those people. But what do you end up with? You end up with, the warlord comes down, he takes all the food and he distributes it to the people he likes. And he gets those people to give him more power.
Then he hoards the rest and charges the undesirables. That's,
Exactly. And so... we're not in a vacuum, and to pretend like we are creates these warlords, right? Because if you, for those of you who have ever been in the Middle East, you know damn good and well that when somebody airdrops something to you, right? It's a pallet with a giant parachute, and it just comes flying out of the sky.
It's quite a thud when it lands,
Yeah. And so, you're sitting there in trucks and you're waiting for this pallet to land. And as soon as it does, by the time that you get out of the trucks and get over there, the local populace is over there just ripping stuff out of it. And you're literally pushing these people off of their own food.
They don't care what it is they're grabbing. They just know that if it's for the Americans, they're going to grab some
Must
of it.
be good, right? And that's just, unless you have that pallet dropped somewhere that is totally within your control, right? So if you have a giant base or something and they can drop it into the base, then you don't have that problem. But if it's out in the open, that's what happens. And the same thing happens everywhere else in the world, right? If you airdrop food or water to the middle of Africa, the local warlord comes down with 35 guys with AKs and says, if any of you touches anything on the pallet, we're going to shoot you. And so in a shocking turn of events, they then load it onto trucks and leave.
Funny enough, if they haven't already appropriated the aid trucks it came in, it's like...
Exactly. Right?
It's really interesting that you mentioned that. Again, it drives me crazy. The I don't know, just the lack of awareness of the way people work, because people respond to their incentives. Again, you look at something like the migrant crisis that's happening over here in Europe, and we're going, we agreed, we stated as a nation under the May government that we were going to, and in fact before then actually, under David Cameron, that we were going to take refugees, we were going to take asylum seekers from Syria. Because Syria, we had, along with Obama, we'd fucked up bits of Syria, and obviously we were in a proxy war with Assad, and we had there was some, initially they floated this idea of having camps along the border between, on the Syria side, between Syria and Turkey, and Turkey wasn't very happy with that for a start. But secondly, but it ended up being a lot cheaper, for instance, than doing it. Of course, you found out that most of the people, if you poll them when they're living in tents at the side, when they've just been previously living in Aleppo, which was a cosmopolitan city, and or as cosmopolitan as the Middle East gets, and they've been living there. These are in many cases highly educated people as well, and they're going, we don't actually want to live in tents at the side, eating rice and water and biscuits for the rest of our perceived existence. When can we go home? And most of them wanted to go home, and they said, well, you can't go home at the moment, but if we offered you an alternative, you could apply for asylum in the UK, so in Europe, sorry. And the ones who went to Turkey, and then Turkey said no. And then everyone started going through up to the Greek islands. They started going through the sea to the Greek islands, and they stayed there. Of course, other nations, especially impoverished nations, hear this news as well, and they go, well, if I say I'm Syrian, most of whom, if they are actually refugees and have fled their homes, don't have paperwork, don't have any proof of their citizenship, they don't have any proof of their educational standards, but if I can convince them that I'm Syrian, I can claim asylum, and I can get into the paradise that is Europe, compared to where I'm living. And this is not me waxing lyrical about how, Europe, it is the breadbasket of the world in terms of wealth. This is these are the statements taken from the actual people. And suddenly they go in there, and they worked out that it was like less than 5% of the people actually making their way through the refugee process in those islands were actually Syrian. And so it's like, well, us having open borders just for asylum seekers would be miraculous, and we would approve every application if they were who they said they were, but humans respond to incentives.
Well, this is, again, there's so much tied up in there, right? So, one, your guys' penalties for claiming to be Syrian, showing up in your country, and being North African are basically zero.
Yeah.
And so if there's nothing to dissuade you, then why not do it, right? Which poses the question, then why do it? And I think this is the problem most of the Western world has, is that we have this giant propaganda arm talking about how living in Western countries is truly terrible, and all of these people are oppressed and blah blah blah, and I'd rather live in Africa. Yeah, well, go to Africa and then get back to me, right? No one believes you that has any idea what's actually going on in Africa, because in most African countries there is a reasonable possibility that on your way to breakfast someone will kill you, and that is not a reasonable possibility in the United States, in most of Europe, in that sort of thing. And, there is a reasonable possibility that when you go home at night, it will be to a mud hut with no cable TV, no electricity, no internet, no air conditioning, blah, 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 blah.
Hey, we had corrugated iron roofs,
right.
So you could listen to the rain when it came down and kept you awake through the night. I lived in Kenya. I lived in Kenya for a bit. It was good.
And it is an incomparable living standard.
Yeah.
And so we act like that's not an incentive. And let me tell you right now, if I am living in warlord-owned rural Africa, it doesn't matter what words come next. If you say, you can move to the West, but, right? it doesn't matter what the but is, right? Unless it's they're literally going to kill you or something, then well, who cares? I don't care what the cost is. If I can move there, if I can bring my children, then the likelihood that of the 9 children I'm bringing, any of them will die in the West is basically zero. And if I stay here, at least 5 of them are basically dead by the time they're adults.
Well, as I say, when I was living in Kisii, which is one of the western provinces of Kenya, the one of the things that's stark and noticeable there is the young men die very, very quickly, and so there's an awfully large population. Every little, they call them villages. A village could be 1 million people, right? 100,000 people, sorry, and they each compound within this village, because they're kind of spread out, has a house specifically for widows, and so a lot of the kind of grassroots organizations, businesses are actually founded and run by these kind of widow conglomerates. And so is it any surprise that most of them, and they also have really big dreams. I mean, there was these little kids, and I went to their school, and they're showing, they're sitting there. They have chalkboards but no chalk. They have two broken sort of desks, and everyone else is sitting on the floor. It's not been maintained, because this is another issue, because charities just go in, build a school, and then get the fuck out. We
did a thing.
Yeah, they don't staff it, they don't do anything. So it's like these kids who are sitting there and they're going, I want to be a lawyer. It doesn't matter where they want to be a lawyer. Most of them want to be a lawyer in Europe, and they say, I want to be a lawyer. And it's like, you're sitting there, you're going to have no real formal qualifications from this. The universities that you're going to is basically an internet cafe in Nairobi, and it's nothing against that. Some people do well out of that, because if they can get a job in the city, then they can work their way up. But the odds that you'll go from being in a rural area 8 hours on a shitty coach away from the city where you're supposed to be studying, you can't afford to rent accommodation there either. There is no student loan system. Then the best thing that you can do is your community will pick the smartest kid in your school, and everyone will chip in as many Kenyan shillings as they can afford, which won't be many, by the way, and pay for that one kid to go and do stuff, in the hopes that they'll come back and provide that wealth back to the village at some point. And that wealth and they're probably going to send a kid who's got the skill set in something the village needs. It's not going to be the kid who's a lawyer, because the village doesn't need a lawyer. They have their own systems. So it's but they all want to come. So if suddenly someone says to them, well, not only will we pay your travel, if you give us all of your life savings, all that money which was going to go to you getting a job or a degree in the local city, and you give that to us instead, we'll traffic you all the way up to Europe, where you will then go, where even on a minimum wage job, you'll be earning 10 times what you'd be earning in local currency, and you can send that back via MoneyGram, which is what they use down there, and it'll all be fine. And then you can find yourself a nice husband or wife, or both, and anyway, all that stuff.
This is a thing that has been going on forever, and when I talk about immigration, I just end up pissing people off, because if you take a look at, again, soul, here comes the basic soul, because Don is talking. But if you look at immigration in the United States, this has been true since the beginning of time, right? After World War II, you see a lot of this, but after World War I, you see a lot. Just anytime there's a major conflict, people come in mass waves to the United States, and it's been this way since the beginning of time. There is notorious discussions about the Irish landing during the potato famine, right? So if there's a problem somewhere else, is what it comes down to. People immigrate to the United States, and what used to happen before we had welfare systems, before we said you can come here and you can keep your garbage culture that you came from, is that massive waves would show up. They would all get jobs, send money home, rebuild their towns, and then huge portions of those waves would leave because they liked wherever they came from. And if what you're doing is, the Fifth Street in New York was known as the Bloody Fifth during the time that the Irish came here, because the Irish would just get drunk and fight, as is so stereotypical of Irish, right? And so what you ended up with is a lot of people would come over here, they would work, they helped rebuild Ireland, sent a lot of money home, that made Ireland able to be rebuilt. And then a bunch of them left. because they said, look, the Americans just keep putting me in jail because I get drunk and fight, and I can go home and get drunk and fight. And so you sort of had the people who wouldn't conform to the culture go away relatively quickly, in less than a generation, because it's the same people who came are the ones that went home. And then we all became wimps. And we said, well,
have your ethnic enclave and we'll like it.
Exactly. Maybe it is okay that you stone women to death in the street if they cheat or something like that. Like, wait a minute, and the less that we enforce the rules, the worse this gets. And the more people stay, because now there's no incentive to leave. The thing that they wanted is now here. So why bother to go home?
It's the I hated looking at so that in France there's been another attack. There was a teacher who was beheaded in the street for showing Muhammad cartoon, and we look at that and you go, like, all the comments on Twitter, especially from the Muslims, especially Muslims who live in France and who live in America and stuff like that, is just like, why did they incite that poor Muslim to have to cut off his head because he was being so disrespectful? And you're like, fuck off. Why is this being tolerated? I mean,
it's Colin Flaherty's been documenting this sort of thing with black violence in America for over a decade now. And it's not happening. Here's why it's happening. Oh, and they deserved it. And it is the exact same thing that you're seeing over there with Islam. Right. So there is no Islamic violence. Well, here's why it happened. Oh, and by the way, this person deserved it. And just over and over and over again, this is what you see. And that's what I mean when I say we become wimps. Right. Because can you imagine any of our grandfathers deciding that it was acceptable to have someone beheaded in the streets? I mean, they'd have been out there building gallows. Like, well, we know how to solve this problem.
It's like, you do not take it into your own hands to do these things. It is not the way it's done. There's a reason why we have all these systems, and they are in a precarious balance. People don't realize that this is the exception, not the rule, right? That most places are filled with a mixture of corruption and mob justice, and I hate calling it justice, but mob justice and a kind of retributive violence, which either goes under the radar or is just endorsed. So I mean, just look at South Africa right now, right? And you need to understand, like, the peace that has been won here was hard fought for, and but something about this to me screams the death of empire. So it's a curious case whether or not it's just that we've become so complacent that the hegemony is now shifting and it's going to change, and we don't know where it's going to go.
Well, this is a thing. If you say out loud, the Americans are a global hegemon, and that's not unrealistic in my opinion, right? At least currently. What you hear from about half of all people is yes, and that's terrible. And I think the only way you
dare
can
they
really
be the world police is the common thing over here, yeah.
Right, and I think the only way you come to that conclusion is if you have no idea what the world was like before there was a guy or a country running around the globe saying, "I have a bigger stick than you. Stop fighting."
Well, we were the first people to do that with the big stick. I mean, don't forget.
Exactly, right? And this is the thing, right? Because take a look at the British Empire, where it touched versus where it didn't touch. And if you were in the part of the world that the British Empire didn't touch, you lived a violent, short life. And the primary difference here between what amounts to the American Empire, insofar as that's true, and the British Empire is mostly that there isn't anywhere we don't touch, right? Not on planet Earth, that's for sure. And
but the American, for quote unquote, empire is a curious one as well, because it is it's the first in the birth of a new way of doing things with regards to at the influence of the nation, right? You might call
Yes.
it an empire without imperial ambition,
Hmm.
or neo-imperial, right? Which is what they call, which is where you want to spread, I suppose, like the culture and instead of wanting to drag a lot of stuff out of other parts of the world, which you already can manage with business arrangements with those people. That's fine. You want to you want to import, export culture, in a way which is slightly different, to actually marching armies in and enforcing that, I suppose.
Well, so our method for years now has been we'll march an army in when you're killing people, um, and that's just how it is, right? You can do a lot of terrible things across the globe, and we don't say or do much about it. But if you start genociding people, then we tend to show up, and someone's going to scream, "Oh, Don, what about Rwanda?" Well, look what happens when we don't. I don't know what else to tell you. But the method here tends to
Didn't you hear? Yeah, the Rwandan genocide has been debunked.
yes.
It doesn't exist according to Che Giga. It's like,
Well, that's important. But the premise here is that um, somehow, and it's the what is it, the noble savage fallacy
mhm.
taken to the extreme, right? If America just got out of people's way, everybody would be happy and friends. And it turns out, no. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. When you say just go do whatever you want, at some point or another, people start fighting, and they just do. And you can sit around and dream up reasons, and it was about resources, but most of the time it's not about resources. These people were going to be starving if they didn't mobilize the biggest war machine the region had ever seen. Like, well, they could mobilize the war machine. Maybe if they weren't mobilizing the war machine, they wouldn't have been starving. I don't know. What do you think? And you find this over and over and over again. And so when I see people, and I know lots of them personally, who complain about us being the world police. And I always think, well, which, God forbid Don defends the Iraq war. But if, you look at this
Please don't defend
and
the
you
Iraq
say,
War.
well, so hold on a minute, right? And we'll see how angry I can make the entire world. If the point here is that America is to go out and make sure that people generally play nice, not that we need to run every facet of your life, then when Saddam was using chemical weapons on his people, was that or was that not justification to go, hey, stop that, right? And the answer there is, well, maybe that covers the Gulf War, right? Specifically because he was expanding into the neighboring country. But that doesn't justify the Iraq War. Okay, well, then we need to pick a hole, right? Either it's fine when people are genociding their own people, or it isn't. And I don't care which one you pick, just pick one. And if that's fine, then okay, we can do more isolationist things, and we can say that when I don't know when Turkey is threatening to kill all of the people coming out of Syria, we're not going to do anything about it. When Iran is killing the non-believers, that's fine. We're not even going to sanction them. We just don't care. And if that's the case, then that's the case.
Well,
But
it used to be the case. Is an interesting thing. It used to there used to be this kind of unspoken rule, I suppose, which was just what happens behind your borders stays behind your borders. But we do live in the information age now, so everything's a lot more easy to corroborate. I mean, even George Clooney rents his own fucking satellite to spy on dictators, right? So it's like
exactly. And this is the thing is I am not personally attached to either outcome here, but stop with the half measure, right? So some genocides are bad, but other ones are okay. Like, well, no, either we don't care or we do. And I am probably cynical and cruel about this, but I don't care if pick one and go down that road. Because if it's, well, we care when it's the genocide of the people that I like, but if you like X, group of people and then they're being genocide, we need to ignore that. Well, all that, we're back to the special interest game.
are you saying communists are people, Don?
No, sorry, my mistake.
I just want to take a moment to just go through a couple of the super chats as
Sure.
kind of like a brief aside, so that we can rest this. But I'm really enjoying this conversation. I'm glad we finally managed to make this happen. I hope that the chat's enjoying it as well. Always a pleasure to have the people along for the ride. Years the Eunuch says, 20 years ago, racism is bad. Don't see colour. Now, 2020. Racism is bad. Segregate along racial lines, or you're a bigoted white person.
Yep.
It's but it's amazing because it's the same argument. I mean, just because racism is bad, don't see color won out back then, or in a limited capacity, doesn't mean that the racism is bad, segregate along racial lines wasn't a massive movement. You know, there was a huge pro-segregationist movement. As I
Well,
understand it.
this is well, welcome to the game, right? So I don't care about segregation insofar as you personally are doing it in your own life, right? So
You,
certainly,
yeah.
technically speaking, my house is segregated. It is myself, my wife, and my son, and this doesn't matter, right, to anybody. But the problem with segregation is when the government says you have to do it, because then that's where all the things that everybody complains about happens. And when you start this game where it's it's everything that is any sort of segregation is wrong. Well, if that is the principle, where does it end? Do I have to move a black person into my house, and do I have to move a Mexican into my house? Where is this line? And the answer should and forever will be, at least in my opinion, it's bad when the government does it. Because look around, look at cancel culture. Is there any way that Starbucks could say no black people in Starbucks? It would be the end of Starbucks in 5 minutes, you know?
It does depend a lot on cultural and social norms. One of the interesting things, because AA maintains, for instance, that the was it 65, the Civil Rights Bill in America,
Uh,
and the whole the enforced desegregation, right? And
yeah.
he would point out that that it destroyed a lot of until that point successful black schools, and that it's caused a lot of cultural contention. The leftist argument is that despite that initial sort of wobbliness, it raised a generation of kids who were less who held less stereotypical views about their peers of other races, and this led to more, I suppose, interracial cohesion is what they want to call it. And I would say, well, look at that now. Look at that, especially in the wake of
I,
things here, when we're still talking about race in these particular terms. But
I would argue that even that's not true, right?
mhm.
Because I presumably am the child that they're talking about, right? I was in school in the late '80s and '90s. I am, by the time that it was all worked out, presumably, after busing had started and then been finagled out and all these sorts of things. I mean, that's me. Right? And I grew up in California, where Kamala Harris likes to talk about how busing got figured out right about the time that I hit school, and it didn't change whatever it is that they're trying to say changed. There was when I went to high school, which I think is secondary school, there was a group of black guys that you stayed away from because they did drugs and got in fights, and that was it. There was no two ways about it. If you went over there, they were going to call you all kinds of racial slurs. They hated you, and that was life.
Mhm.
And there was, if
I
this
think
unto itself was not, some greater scenario where everybody was all happy, we just got told to act like it was.
I think it didn't get over the class boundary, which I think is more exacerbated in the US. And also we had issues with you can never, like, forced desegregation was an attempt to abolish in-group preference, and has effectively been the benchmark by which all other attempts to do so have been enacted in the future, which again is why AA is like, oh, the legacy of it's really bad, which I would say probably more harm than good. Yeah.
By every metric that you could actually calculate, it is pretty realistically more harm than good. And it is only when you get to real flowery abstractions that you start hearing that it's a good thing.
And again,
mostly because you can't measure them.
we've reached the point now where I've sat through a lecture talking about in-group preference, because that's just the sort of thing that I love to do for fun. And they get up this example, and it's a website. I think it's called Circles and Squares, and it basically has this thing, a slider, where you can set the amount of in-group preference and the number of participants. So you set it to 200 or whatever the max is, 1,000, and then you put the in-group preference to however you want, and it will tell you how many years it will take if everyone moves on average once a year, in order to become a completely segregated society. And right? And so you look at it and you go, right, 500 people of one type, 500 people of another. You can add more groups if you like. And if you put the in-group preference to like 50%, then in 25 years, everyone will be in their little left-wing enclaves, right? And it doesn't matter what what it is, whether or not it's race or it's a tradition or if it's religion or whatever. That's the in-group preference. If it's family groups. And if you set it to 0.01%, or just it's a less than a 1% in-group preference, then it takes a while longer, but the end result is you'll all still end up segregated anyway. It just takes longer, and so unless you could totally abolish in-group preference, you're never gonna do it. And then the takeaway, the last statement is like, so I hope you could all see why in-group preference is bad, was the statement at the end of the lecture. And I'm going, no, have you not seen? It's like, it doesn't matter if it's bad or good, it's immutable. You can't get rid of it. If I prefer to stick around with people who like to play snooker, eventually I'm going to end up completely segregated with people who like to play snooker as opposed to people who like to play pool. It's as simple as that.
Yes. This is, it becomes a much more serious thing if you get away from hobbies. Well, sort of, right? So, I lived in California for a bunch of years. Every single time I went shooting, every neighbor was staring out their windows, watching the crazy guy with the giant beard and the guns.
Yeah, I got the police called on me when I was shooting in my garden. That was quite funny. Yeah.
Exactly, right? And guess what doesn't happen in Texas? No one cares.
No one cares.
You could strap a gun to your side and go to the store, and people do every day, and no one even notices. No one cares. It's just life. Right. And this is the premise of in-group preference. Right. So do I want the cops called on me every time I go shooting? No, for obvious reasons. First of all, what they know is that they are going to talk to a guy with a gun. What I know is that I am a guy with a gun that the cops are coming to talk to. This is probably not a great initiation of talking to the cops. It doesn't. You put your life in jeopardy at least a little bit simply because your neighbor is some Karen that doesn't like guns. And I mean, that's why you're never going to get away from in-group preference, because it's just not doable, right? If it's the same thing with basically everything else, right? To the snooker pool distinction, right? Mm-hmm. You're probably not getting the cops called on you, but if there's a whole town that what they do is play pool and you are looking for a snooker table, you ain't going to find one. You're having a 40-minute drive, right? Or something like that to be able to go do the thing that you want. At some point, you're going to say, this is costing me more in gas than it would to just move.
And so you go. If only because, you love to talk about snooker and they don't know anything and they don't care.
Exactly.
In the same way that I would expect and do expect, I grew up in a Christian community. We didn't really interact with people who outside the Christian community because it was just like they just don't get it. It wasn't an animus against them particularly. In fact, the only thing was that you wanted to interact with them sometimes because you wanted to bring them into the fold and make them part of the in-group, as religions like to do. But for the most part, it was like your friends are Christians, your parents are Christians, or your parents' friends are Christians. Like I grew up in an area where everyone that I knew came from a family which was not broken. There were no
Yeah.
divorce. There was no divorce. And in fact, when my cousin's dad ran off, my uncle ran off to Hong Kong with another woman, it was like the biggest schism in the whole community because it was something which just hadn't happened in years and years and years and years and years. It wasn't
Yes.
a done thing, and I don't care if people say there was stuff that you didn't see as a kid and stuff like that, because it was just like the expectation and the understanding, in the same way that no one really got married past 25 because they were all married by then. It's like these different societal expectations.
And this is the thing is, for those of people like me who have basically always been at least somewhat conservative, right? The first time I got called a Republican, I was 17 or 18 years old, because I was saying that the minimum wage was a bad thing. And I live in California and had long hair. Yes, shockingly, I did once have long hair. And so it was
the idea that you once had hair.
Right. And the answer was, who would have guessed that under all that long hippie hair, there was a Republican? And I went, I don't know what that means, because
it's like,
all right, I pay attention to politics, but why is this a pejorative?
And you were like, and I'm also going to join the Marines, wasn't it? It's just like, I don't
right.
know. Yeah.
And so there's this thing that happens when you have fundamentally different beliefs from the people around you. There's no conversation that I was in for years that wasn't me explaining for an hour and a half why someone was an idiot. Right. And that's basically what it was, and you get things that happen like the left says overtly political things. And they don't think they're political. They think it's just life. Orange Man is bad was my favorite. You get it all the time. And I'd go, well, why is Orange Man bad? And all of a sudden it's, Don, why'd you bring up politics? Like you literally said the president sucked and you think I brought up politics?
Yeah.
And so, who really wants to be the person that is running around every single minute of every single day explaining why basic conversation is wrong? And again, you end up with this in-group preference discussion.
It's also little things. I was at a Christmas party last year before all the COVID shenanigans, and with two colleagues who subsequently found out about my political leanings and kicked me out the project that we were all working on together. That was great. And they were sitting there and they were like, we don't really do politics. I think both of them were immigrants from Brazil, or where Bolsonaro is, wherever that is. And I remember one of them coming to me and saying, I went to a protest against Bolsonaro the other day, and I'm like, in the UK, okay. It's like, got together with a load of Brazilians, and I was like, so what did you do? Did you go to any politicians? Are you brainstorming ideas? She's like, no. We stood there and we screamed at his public broadcast, and I'm like, and she was like, it felt so good. It was so cathartic, and I was like, well, maybe good for you to sit in a locked room in the bottom of some basement somewhere with a load of other Brazilians and scream at a TV. But the other one was. I'm like, it seems like it's almost sad to break their illusion. The other one, the other one was standing there, and she said, oh, how do you think the election is going to go? Because we had the general election, which was going on around then. And I said, look, there's no way Corbyn's going to win it. It's just a question of how much Boris is going to win by. And the look of just disappointment and sadness on her face, and it's like, I don't want to be around these people, but these are the only people. It's just I can't get away from them. Why do you think I have?
Well, this is sort of the thing, right? Is that this goes to another problem that is pretty pervasive in society, which is to say that if you say a thing exists, obviously you're making a moral judgment about it in most people's eyes. And so, if you point this out, like, this is a coffee cup, right? And that is just true.
It looks more like a thermos to me, Don.
Sure, let's go with thermos. Right? But it's a thermos. Yeah, all right. And so you make some basic statement like that, and everybody goes, well, yeah. And then if you say, well, it's not really possible that Jeremy Corbyn wins this election. Oh, that's because you want him to lose. Like, well, no. it is just simply true that the way things are aligned right now, it's not feasible. He's not going to win. I see this situation as impossible. And this gets worse when you get into prognostication as opposed to just saying something that already exists. You know, if you say that Trump is going to win the election, then you're saying that because you want him to win the election, and it's not about whether or not the scenario as laid out in the United States says that Trump's pretty likely to win the election. It's about whether or not you are emotionally attached to it, and this causes those kinds of problems, right? Because it doesn't really matter if I want Trump to win the election. I do, but if I thought he was going to lose, I'd be screaming it from the rooftops. You know.
Yeah. You'd be trying to either convince more people to vote for him, or you'd be conceding and being like, right, what's my exit strategy right now? So it's
Yeah.
We also have there's also the question of what does a post-Trump world look like? But
Not
that,
good.
I tell you what, let's shelve that one for a little later. Again, we got through one whole super chat before we tangented and went on a massive long discussion about in-group preference. But I'm sure Yiz got her money's worth there. Kenrick for $20 US. Thank you very much. That's generous. Says, I sounded sarcastic there. It's very generous. I'm very appreciative. Thank you very much, Kendrick. Says, during the lockdown, I've been seeing a growing narrative by neocons that populism is equal to handouts. They insist that real populism would be giving thousands to every person instead of letting them work. Letting them work. Ignorance or malice? Question mark. I haven't really seen much from neocons or self-declared neocons, given the term has really fallen out of favor over here. But are you seeing any of this sort of stuff over where you are, Don?
So I think the best example I can think of would be the Marco Rubios of the world, who are the ones out there saying we really need the stimulus bills, and we really need to take government money and give that to people. It's not so much that they're saying that we need UBI, though.
No, although there's the Yang gang there,
Right.
It's everyone from like full UBIists to Milton Friedman's reverse income tax, right?
Oh, if only, but it's not. That reverse income tax might end the welfare state, and nobody who wants UBI wants to do that. So
no, it's the reverse income tax is fascinating. I don't know why it's never even been trialed. That's the thing with it. I'm like, surely anyone with like a lick of sense is going, that it makes sense. Because if you get your hand out for those of you who don't know, if you get your hand out at the moment and you get a job which pays you the same amount as the handout, you lose the handout for no net benefit to yourself. If you have a reverse income tax, every pound or every dollar that you earn is actually not reducing your handout, as it were, that your reverse income tax that much. So you are seeing more money in your account. You're seeing not as much as once you get past that, but you're still seeing more benefits, as it were. You still got more money in your account at the end of the day.
Right. It's basically the premise of welfare without the disincentivization, and that is why it never gains any traction, right? Because there is a reality here that the people who are promoting the welfare state know full well that the right is correct when they say, you're buying voters, you're doing whatever it is that you're doing, that we accuse them of. Because if they weren't, then the negative income tax would be not only wholly justifiable, but it would be the correct answer, right? If this give people a hand up instead of a hand out thing was really what they were after, negative income tax is the answer. It is, however, a complete reform of two things that are bureaucratically beneficial to a lot of politicians. One, the welfare state, and two, the tax system. So you can't, you would have to be willing to be pushed out of politics in 5 minutes to even suggest it on a political level, because it would take away large swaths of the political game by enacting this one single policy. And so the political incentives of this are terrible, but
not to mention, you have to effectively say there's every department that currently exists in the US and the UK state, for instance, if we enacted this simultaneously. Every department that supports anything to do with welfare is now gone and shut down, replaced by a single small office that can deal with a single tax rate. You might even have two offices if it's a variable tax rate, but we don't even need to do that. And it just becomes, or even if that, it becomes folded into the existing tax system, in which case it's just the same department again, and it all gets folded in. And
maybe it gets a little bigger, but you're still laying off tens of thousands, possibly millions of government employees.
Yeah.
And there's no political will to do that. Nobody wants to be that guy.
Speaking of which, I hear Trump has just axed the job protections for thousands of workers over there, or in an executive order in the sort of the last week before the election move.
I have to go read the actual order, which is never out on the day the headlines are out. But it sounds, and I am almost hopeful, right? Because if that's true, then well, first of all, we're going straight to court. That's where we're going, because those people do not let their job protections go. They just don't. Their unions will be losing their minds. And so that's not great, but here's to hoping it works out. If we are actually going to have a government service that can be held accountable at all for any reason ever, that would be amazing compared to what we have now. I notoriously hate on the VA regularly and forever, though I do have to admit it has gotten substantially better since Trump put in that White House complaint hotline. I don't know where, what strings of power that thing connects to, but I do know that I personally have had to call it a few times, and then things actually happened. Which, if you're a veteran in the U.S., that's not how this goes, right?
Okay.
You make a complaint to the VA, it gets put in a file, and then 5 years later, somebody calls you and they say, well, the person that you were complaining about has changed jobs anyway, so don't worry about it.
That's not great, is it? Yeah. I mean, we don't have a VA as such. We have three. Well, I have three principal private charities, which are the RAF Benevolent Fund, the Royal British Legion, and the RAF Veterans Association. So the RAFA, the RAF Association, sorry. But they're all private enterprises, as it were. Our military just kind of dumps you. There's no real political arm of it, as it were, which is kind of a benefit.
Well, so presumably a lot of the reason that you guys don't have a VA the way that we do is that you do have an NHS, and that your guys' welfare state is rather expensive compared to ours. And so it's not, if you have a disability that requires compensation, my understanding is it doesn't matter if you're in the military or not. You just go file for disability compensation and you're done. And that's not, I know. So, Dawn, what about Social Security disability? At the time that the VA was set up, that wasn't a thing.
I love how you're steel-manning yourself there. Dawn wasn't. Right. Okay, go on.
And, at the time the VA was set up, that wasn't really a thing. Social Security disability wasn't a big thing. It's still a disaster. So there's not a lot of really comparable things in the US and UK in that fashion, because you have what the VA does in America, your society just does in general. So it would be more redundant than I think even the government would appreciate if you guys had a VA.
Chat's just asking me, don't the military get priority treatment on the NHS? No. When you're in the Air Force, you are effectively in private care. You don't go to NHS hospitals if you can avoid it. We have our own medical centres, and Anything which is kind of like large scale, they bring in specialists who are paid an obscene amount of money. It's like one of my colleagues was a doctor. He was 45 years old, although he looked about 60. Although I put that down to the port that he drank. And he was like, well, the only reason I'm in the Air Force is because he was getting made a squadron leader off the bat. And he said, and I like the lifestyle, I like the idea of the uniform, I like that doing. I've just come from working for 10 years for the military. At the moment, they pay me £140,000 a year. At the time we were both injured, right? So he's being paid to go to the gym for 5 hours a day for an injury that he knew he had before he came in, that he told the military about, and they were like, "Oh, just come anyway." And he was like, "Look, I'm not going to be able to work." They said, "Look, just get through the first day induction, a test, and then we'll defer your course." He attested, went to the medical center, and they were like, "Well, you can't send him home because he's injured his ankle." And he's attested, so now he comes under our primary care. So you're going to have to billet him here, where the rent is like £100 a month, and pay him his salary instead of just waiting the 3 months that he told you about before he came into the Air Force to go in, because he's not worried about that. But he'd just come off 10 years working as a consultant on the exact same base. In civilian clothing, and there they were paying him 420,000 a year. So it's not exactly like he was on chump change.
People complain about our military-industrial complex. I mean,
he had 25 years experience. He was a senior medical professional and that sort of thing. That's a bit different, but it was a bizarre situation.
Well, that's the thing the U.S. military would never tolerate, right? They have giant screenings here, where you do all kinds of ridiculous stuff before you can get in, and they very avidly try and make it so that if you were injured, they can tie it to something that happened before service, so they don't have to pay for it. It's ridiculous what it's come to in that sense, because if you talk to people about going to the VA in this country, and if you are going to go to the VA, talk to people because you need the advice. But I don't know. You broke your finger when you were 10. If you tell that to the VA and you're missing a limb, they will try and figure out how that broken finger caused the missing limb, and therefore they don't have to cover you. It's truly ridiculous.
I mean, that's in a sort of similar sense. That's why I didn't get compensation for my nerve damage, because they were like, "Well, you can't tie it to us." I was like, "I didn't have it when I joined the military. I have it now. I broke my legs in the middle. Something's gone wrong here." It's like,
right. It's the same sort of game here, right? They in the world's most shocking coincidence, I was an artilleryman and I have hearing damage. Who could have seen that coming? And they consistently are like, well, do you really have hearing damage? Do you, I know you can't hear anything out of your left ear except ringing, but is that really the military's fault? Like, well, yes.
You made me shoot enormous weapons that cause tinnitus on a regular basis.
Right.
Yeah. The military's funny. We should have a proper military discussion and bring some more people on at some point. But it's been a long time since I've been in there, and I wasn't in for very long, so it does. I look at it. I'm ashamed to call myself a veteran. I don't do it because in most cases, because I'm just someone who was in the Air Force for a time, because I just didn't achieve very much.
Welcome to sort of a reality of veterans, and I guess this is more of a PSA for chat. There's no more uncomfortable moments in my life than the various people who have come by and been like, "Thank you for your service. You're a hero to this nation." I'm like,
"Oh,
am
God.
I?"
Me and my brother got that on a train, and I'm like, I told planes where to go, and he fixes tanks for a living, which we don't use. So it's like there's not really much going on. Right. SJ.
I think we're in the middle of super chat somewhere.
I know, right. So that was Right, okay, so during so we're just going back to Kenrick's one. During the lockdown, I saw a growing narrative that populism equals handouts. I think we covered that. SJAAJL, which is an interesting name. Sorry, SJ-A-AJL says, "Hi Don." No one ever says hi to Mark. I mean, it's it's very sad. It's always hi Don. Hi Don. Good to see people out here who are looking for realistic solutions, unlike those utopian cigar stream clowns, Charlemagne and Turnip Merchant. So thanks for that, SJA.
I appreciate that you enjoy what I have to say. I will leave the rest of that very far alone.
Yes. The curious thing for me when it comes to realistic solutions, because this is the thing which turned me off politics, I stopped producing content for a while. I did keep up fake accents, but I tried to turn it more non-political and that sort of thing. Is I look at it and I go, I get really frustrated. I can't do a Sargon and say, or a Tim Pool, and say effectively the same rhetoric every single day in every single video for the same stream. It doesn't work unless I have a way of thinking through how to make something work. And the crux of it for me is, as commentators, that's all we're doing. We're commentating on things. It's like I look at it and I go, what do we need? Who do we need? Where do we need? Is there anyone in the country at the moment? Is there anyone in the world at the moment who is fulfilling a role which our hypothetical situation is going to improve our hypothetical situation and enact our hypothetical trade-off, because I won't call it a solution. So and I don't see a lot of that, because I at the moment in Britain, for instance, who do we have? It's like people put their faith in Nigel Farage. He doesn't want to be in politics, and he's got out and he's doing his own thing with the migrants at the moment. You've got Jacob Rees-Mogg, who has like 6 to 8 kids. I think it's 6. I'm getting confused with Radlib. He has 6. He has 6 kids. He never wanted to be more than a backbencher, but kind of got pushed and became the Speaker of the House. He said that he's never wants to be the leader of the Conservative Party. Well, we can't use him because he's speaking the truth, and anyone who doesn't believe that he's not being upfront with you there is and thinks he's playing some kind of 8D chess is just off your rocker, I'm afraid. And so it's like, well, who else do we have? Well, we have Lawrence Fox, who has the charisma of a wet lettuce. We have David Curtin, who has a more fleshed out manifesto, but no one's ever heard of him. And that's it. It's not like we have some kind of some massive populist figure who everyone's going to get behind. We don't have anyone.
Welcome to the problem of what the right is.
I think we've come on to the problem of post-Trumpism here as well, haven't we? Because there's nothing after him.
Well, most people who are even vaguely the direction of the right want to be left alone. In general, right? So if you've got somebody who's out there saying, it would be good if we let people do more of whatever they wanted and we stopped trying to rule all of their lives, it shouldn't exactly be surprising that person is probably living by very similar principles and doesn't actually want to be the head of the country, controlling what everyone is doing, right?
Mm-hmm. Well,
and it's the paradox of the right.
The paradox of the left is they don't want to do that either. But what they do instead is they want someone to be there who does control everything about their lives and simplifies things, as it were.
Yes.
And makes things safe. And then, of course, one of them, who happens to be like a complete narcissist or part of the establishment, comes up and fulfills that role. But it's I think that most I find myself considering on an almost, I'd say, monthly basis, not quite weekly, picking up sticks finishing my degree here, chinning off the politics thing, finding a secluded community somewhere and living a life there and being happy. And then I'm like, but there are no secluded communities, and even if there are, they won't exist in 50 years. So unless I build my own one in some wood somewhere and don't tell anyone that it exists, in which case I'm chinning off the comforts of modern life, which I am accustomed to and do quite enjoy. So it's catch-22, right? We can't all be subsistence farmers.
This is the other thing, is that the left are not going to stop coming for you, right? And there have been a few really great examples of this over time.
They called the Lake District racist, Don. They called the Lake District racist.
They are coming for everything, and they're not going to stop. And in all of the retreating attempts, right, which I get in a lot of trouble for complaining about, but all of I'm going to go over here. I'm going to get away from the left in X, Y, or Z way. I just want to, go somewhere, and they're not going to care about me. They always care, right? They always, always, always come for you. And it should be obvious by now, right? The United States, the premise of federalism is that the states can do whatever they want, and the feds will kind of just leave everybody alone.
Yeah. We have to remember. You have to remember, these are the same people who are now bereft of a specific organization, because the state is a bit more faceless, who would have been the heretic seekers, the Puritans of the church, who would have gone out and found the nearest town of heretics to be dragged out. That's as simple as that. They will not stop coming because they have the moral compunction to do it.
Yeah. And that is the thing, is they think they are morally correct, that you are a bad person. You are the physical embodiment and existence of evil if you are out there doing a thing that they don't approve of. And I think this is the thing that, for everybody who says, the United States could just break into lefty land and normal people. Well, your sole existence, just being there, is enough to aggravate them. It is enough to make them have a problem, right? And this is when I talk about it is a global push for communism. A lot of people get upset with me about my preference choice of the word communism. Oh, it's not communism. It's whatever. I don't really care. Call it whatever you want. I don't get attached to words very much. But regardless, they are coming for everywhere, no matter what.
Oh, yeah.
There just simply isn't a stopping.
If the US decided to secede into a left and a right state, and hopefully it would be, very OCD compliant, so it would be the right on the East Coast and the left on the West Coast, they would... the right would be the ones they propose this. They say, look, you hate us all. You keep calling us white supremacists, right? So why don't you all fuck off over there? We'll keep to ourselves over here, and you can have those ones, we can have these ones, and we'll interact civilly, but not any more than you want to. At which point the left will literally turn around and full, phlegm in your face and scream, "You're too dangerous to be left alive!" And then That's what Civil War 2.
Your evil white supremacy that you will have over there is going to be what's causing all of the problems over here.
Even if they delude themselves into thinking they'll become a superstate, you give it 5 years. Less. You give it a year, and you see the difference in the behaviors and the state of things, and you'll have raids across the border, and so it will become those nasty white supremacists are killing black people at their border again because we want to get in. I don't know,
Exactly. And it would be, it's the same thing with the East and West German Berlin Wall over and over and over again. It's, you existing is too much, right? And this is a thing that you can see play out currently, at least in the United States. Dave, the distributist, brought this up when I was talking to him recently. He said, if you've ever lived in really, really lefty land, the thing that is going on with lefty politicians, with Democrat politicians, is always them talking about Republicans. There's not a Republican for 500 miles, and they haven't had policy influence in the past 25 years. But the problem is always those evil Republicans.
No, I know exactly what you mean. In the same way that the Democrat cities are burning, and the Republicans are saying law and order. The Democrats are saying, "How dare you impose law and order on our Democrat cities?" And the Democrats who are actually there are saying, "How dare you come in and try and fix our mess for us? We're doing just fine, thank you, with our community gardens." So
Exactly.
and it's strict because they've silenced or driven out anyone who's there. I don't want to say curious because I think it's a terrible shame. But if you look at somewhere like Seattle, and it's had this kind of long and storied history, especially over the last century, with regards to we have lots of pop culture references and film media which references Seattle, and I'm really worried that it's gonna go the way of Detroit, or but worse, right? Where it's going to be all the wealthy people. Like, I don't care if it's like it's on the basis of color or anything. It's like all the wealthy people and anyone who can afford to move out is getting out of there because it's not safe. Like you do, it's basic human nature. You don't stay where you aren't safe, and so it's just going to go to absolute shit. And what a waste of a city. Took years to build, took years to make it, and it took it less than a year to tear it down, and it will take less than 5 years for it to all degrade to nothing.
Well, this is they're already having that problem.
Mm-hmm.
They passed the $15 an hour minimum wage in Seattle a couple of years ago.
Did they?
Something like 30 or 40% of the businesses in Seattle shut down and moved to the edge of the city, within 30 days.
There's no chance.
It was, and it didn't stop there. That was just those who were in a time frame. Pretty clearly, it was those who were in a time frame where they could end their leases and move immediately.
It's the thing that irritates me about it is it's so bloody easy to refute, because you have two Thomas Sowell quotes that you got there. Every time tax cuts have been made, tax revenues have increased. That's a really important statistic. And the second one is every time the minimum wage has increased, the number of jobs have decreased. And it's like, that's directly going to affect not only your unemployment rate, but it's going to affect the cost of goods and services. It's going to affect just general inflation, because it's concentrating the wealth in the hands of fewer people, which means that the prices are being marketed to those particular people, as opposed to having, let's say the minimum wage didn't exist per se, but was kind of arbitrarily at around $2, and most people are on a minimum wage job because most people are, then everything is going to be priced according to that method, as opposed to the $15 an hour minimum wage, where you've suddenly got 20% of your population who are unemployed, who have no money, and suddenly a carton of milk is costing them $4. It's unrealistic.
Well, welcome to Games with Statistics, and I damn lies and statistics. Yeah, gotcha. But the only way that you end up with most people make minimum wage is if you compare down to the penny wages, right? Because most people don't make minimum wage, right? It is not 51% of people who make minimum wage.
That's right. I make considerably under minimum wage.
I think that's the deal with YouTube.
But, oh yes. But anyway, go on.
But for the hourly wage earners, right? Basically nowhere is 51 or 50.1 or 50.01% of people making minimum wage. That's not a thing. And so when you say most people are making minimum wage, what you're doing is you're grading every other income bracket small enough that it is less than the number of people making minimum wage, and you're doing it arbitrarily so you can say
I see what you're saying.
Most people make minimum wage.
I suppose I'm doing it on tax brackets because of our incremental system. So, but I appreciate that's it's still an arbitrary distinction, categorization.
Well, and so I mean, you're going to end up with even tax brackets are going to sort of naturally fall. So the biggest tax bracket is going to be the smallest group of people, simply because we have progressive tax systems, right? So, the tiniest group of people is always going to be whatever the top tax bracket is, right? So people who make over £2 million a year is always going to be smaller than people who make minimum wage, right? So,
hopefully, otherwise we've got a Zimbabwe on our hands, and that's not going to go well for anybody.
Exactly. And so the next gradations are about how much can you take away from these people without them getting too upset, and that's basically what it comes down to every time.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And so that those numbers are going to have to be finessed, so the groups are smaller and smaller and smaller. And so if you were talking about people who make minimum wage versus everybody else, then people who make minimum wage is going to be relatively small compared to literally everyone else. But as long as you can say, and the largest group of people are those who make minimum wage, so those are the people we have to do something for, then there's political power in that. There's political capital to spend there, and that's a lot of why it gets done that way.
But yes, I think we started this off talking about realistic solutions on our super chat, and that was that. Hagnar the Viking says, "Nice to see Don. If she's 4 or 5, you'll taste my 45, the pleb."
So that might not make a lot of sense if you haven't been hanging around the stream so long.
Just sounds to me like you like shooting kids, man. That's what it is.
So when cuties happened, I was unrepentantly tired of the pedo thing, and so I started picking up a lot of nicknames related to if you're a pedo, chances are good I'm going to shoot you.
If I find out you've been diddling kids, ain't no justice system my justice system.
Exactly.
It's as simple as that.
I'd be more upset about it, but I mean, if you're going to get a string of nicknames, those are the ones to get.
Yeah, no, can't do it. I mean, to be fair, like, you don't want to introduce yourself to, I don't know, your girlfriend's family for the first time as Don the pedo destroyer pleb, but it's still, but on the internet it's marvelous. It's marvelous. I don't know. Maybe they're into that. They're like, so you're a pedo destroyer, I hear.
Right. Luckily, I've been married for a long time, and so I don't have to worry about introducing myself to anybody anymore.
Fair enough. Just whenever you get your heck. Oh, never mind. Architect of Fate says, "Don, your hair didn't go missing. Just use a mirror and check your back."
No, my hair is just subject to gravity. It used to be up here, now it's down here.
NSO, you should watch Don and Binary's 6-hour stream about airmen versus Marines in a pub. Thank you. Thank you, Architect of Fate. Yeah, I saw that stream was 5 hours 55, and I was like, maybe another time. But
yeah.
I do enjoy occasionally popping in, but unfortunately, your general time slots doesn't really work for me, Don.
It's much better for morning show in America than it is the get out of school crowd in the UK.
I'm not in school, but yes, that sort of thing. Craig H says, "Oh, hi Mark. Hi Craig. Thanks for sending it. Hi Mark. Have you ever experienced the delights of spicy chat?" Is this a reference? I mean,
so because YouTube is so punitive about what your chat says,
yes.
I created a Discord channel called Spicy Chat, and I said, look, keep the YouTube chat relatively polite. I, of course, don't care what you say. I'm very, very hard to offend. So by all means, say whatever you want. Just say it in Spicy Chat. Mm-hmm. And Spicy Chat is as spicy as you would imagine.
I didn't know you. I haven't been in your Discord server in a long time. So we might have a peruse of that after. Off air afterwards. At the moment, I can't use Discord because if I try and use Discord here, you lose Don, and that doesn't work for us.
Seems purpose defeating.
Yeah, a bit purpose defeating. Yeah. So, and finally, last super chat. Matthew Van Skolk says, "Don di Torquemada." I have no idea what a talk.
I don't know what that is.
A Torquemada is. Search Google. Thomas de Torquemada was a Castilian Dominican friar and the first Grand Inquisitor of Spain's move. Is the head of the Spanish Inquisition.
So, when I was talking to Sargon, he handed me the nickname the Inquisitor.
It's a good one. It's a good one. So that's good. I can see I'm being insulted now in chat by Binary for my, we haven't been going for 6 hours yet, and apparently my beard is not a beard. It's I shaved a rat and glued this to my face. Thanks, Binary. Always a pleasure to have you with us.
You know what's funny about that is the wife has been calling this beard my face hamster for, I don't know, 10 years now.
Strong. I think. There we go. Yeah, just had to reset the camera there. You were frozen whilst we were doing that.
Good times.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sure enough.
Okie dokie. Right. I think I'm probably gonna bring it to a close there.
You're not pushing for the 6 hour stream yourself.
I'm not pushing for a 6 hour stream. I don't want to go into fake accents tomorrow evening with no voice. But unfortunately, as well, I've got things on this evening. So I'm glad we've finally managed to make something happen, Adon. It's been wild.
It is for those that they're earlier on in chat was the how dare you blow off the dawn. I keep peering back behind the curtain, I guess, as it were. This is just how YouTube getting together and talking to people things goes. It's always like, all right, so we're going to schedule something. You know what? It turns out I'm really busy for the next 2 weeks, but at the end of those 2 weeks, we're going to sit down. We're going to schedule something. Okay, cool. The end of the 2 weeks comes, and the other person's like, man, I'm really busy for like 2 weeks.
Yeah. Life. It gets
just
in the way.
how it goes.
Unfortunately, it is. But no, we'll have to do another one. We'll have to do another one sometime. It'll be good because I think we barely really scratched the surface of how we need to deal with any of this shit. So it's
it's the downside to having thousands and thousands of hours of this is the tactical things that I want to do, is that there's the feasibility of covering a lot of them in even a couple of hours is basically zero.
So much autism, so little time. That's just the nature
exactly.
of it. But yes. But thank you. So thank you very much to chat for coming along. I hope this has been an interesting discussion. I hope you've enjoyed it. And thanks to Don for coming to an episode of, if this goes on for another one, I'll call the next one In Dire Distress as well. Because that's what the upside down American flag apparently stands for. So,
and it does.
And
thanks for having me.
No problem. Thanks to everyone. Thanks for everyone who super chatted, and we'll see you next time. I'll see you tomorrow if you're coming for Fake Accents Unite, and I'm sure Don will see his crew next time he streams. Take care, everyone. Bye bye.